Welcome to the Explainer. All right, today we're jumping into a word you hear all the time, but one that is just wrapped in myths: nonprofit. We're going to pull back the curtain on what it really means, and trust me, the answer is probably not what you think.
So think about it. What are these places? A hospital, a big university, your local animal shelter. What do they all share? It's more than just doing good things. Turns out they all operate under a very specific and, yeah, very misunderstood legal structure that sets them apart from pretty much every other business out there.
So here's what we're going to cover. We'll start with the name itself, because it causes a lot of confusion. Then we'll get to the one single rule that defines everything. We'll see just how huge the sector is, follow the money to see where it really comes from, ask who's in charge, and finally talk about a better way to think about the bottom line.
Okay, first up, the single biggest source of confusion is right there in the name. The word nonprofit just leads most of us down a completely wrong path about how these organizations actually work. Here's the deal. Nonprofit is, at its heart, a tax status. It's a legal label from the IRS. And as experts at places like BoardSource will tell you, it is not a business plan that says you can't make money. All it means is that the organization was created for a mission, not to make the owners rich.
So if they can make money, what actually makes a nonprofit, well, a nonprofit? It all boils down to one single, incredibly important rule. This one idea is the legal bedrock of the entire sector.
This is it. This is the whole shebang. It's called the non-distribution constraint, a term from a really foundational article by Yale law scholar Henry Hansman. And it means exactly what it sounds like. A nonprofit can absolutely make a profit, what they call a surplus, but it is legally forbidden from handing that money out to the people in control. There are no private owners, there are no shareholders getting dividend checks.
And this is really where the rubber meets the road. A regular for-profit business, its whole reason for being is to make money for its owners. Any profit, any surplus goes into their pockets. But a nonprofit, that same surplus has to be plowed right back into the mission, whether that's curing diseases, educating students, or rescuing animals.
You know, the National Council of Nonprofits even calls the term a misnomer because of this. Making a profit isn't just okay. It's often absolutely necessary for a nonprofit to survive and grow. So the key question isn't, do they make a profit, but where does the profit go?
Okay, so now that we get the DNA of a single nonprofit, let's zoom out, because this isn't some small niche corner of our world. The nonprofit sector is an absolute giant.
Check this out. According to the National Council of Nonprofits, there are more than 1.3 million charitable nonprofits registered just in the United States. That is a staggering number of organizations woven into the fabric of every single community. And here's a huge mythbuster for you. Nonprofits aren't just run by well-meaning volunteers. They are a massive employer. We're talking 12.3 million jobs. That's about 10% of the entire private workforce in the U.S., making it the third largest employer, right behind retail and manufacturing. It's huge.
And as legal scholars like James Fishman point out, it's a huge mistake to talk about the nonprofit sector like it's all one thing. It's not. It's this incredibly diverse universe, everything from giant hospital systems to tiny food banks. In fact, for all the big names we know, the vast majority, 92% of them, are actually smaller community-based groups with budgets under $1 million.
So if you've got 1.3 million organizations and they can't distribute profits, how do they all pay the bills? Well, this brings us to one of the biggest myths of all: how nonprofits are actually funded.
Just take a second. When you picture how a nonprofit gets its money, you probably think of fundraising dinners, right? Or maybe big checks from foundations. And look, that's definitely part of the story, but it's a much, much smaller part than you'd think.
The reality and the data on this is just jaw-dropping, is that a whopping 80% of all the money flowing into the nonprofit sector comes from earned income. We're talking about fees for services, like your hospital bill or college tuition. It's sales from things like a museum gift shop, and it's contracts with the government to provide public services. Those private donations from people like us, that's only about 10%. And grants from big foundations and corporations, that's way down at the bottom. So this brings up a really logical question.
In a for-profit, you have shareholders breathing down the CEO's neck, right? Their money is on the line. So if a nonprofit has no owners, who's in charge? Who holds them accountable and makes sure they're actually serving the public good?
It's not just one person, it's a whole system of accountability with different layers. The first line of defense is the board of directors. It's a group of volunteers, and they are legally responsible for making sure the organization sticks to its mission. Then you got government regulators. The state attorney general is there to protect the public, and the IRS can literally take away their tax-exempt status. And finally, there's us, the public. Donors and watchdog groups provide that critical public pressure.
Okay, this all leads us to our final and maybe most critical point. If nonprofits aren't designed to maximize profit, then judging them on purely financial numbers just doesn't work. We need a totally new way to think about what success actually looks like. And that brings us to the infamous overhead myth. For decades, we were all taught that a good nonprofit is one with super low overhead. The one that spends the least on things like salaries, rent, and technology. But as the National Council of Nonprofits says here, that's actually a dangerous trap. Starving an organization of the money it needs to run effectively, to hire good people, to have working computers, that can cripple its ability to do any good at all.
Let's just break it down. The myth says low overhead means you're efficient. The reality is that effective organizations must invest in themselves. It's not waste, it's a necessary investment in impact. You can't run a food bank without paying for refrigerators and a warehouse manager. Trying to do that just guarantees failure.
So what's a better way to think about it? Well, nonprofit leader Amy Faz talks about this powerful idea called the double bottom line. It means we should judge a nonprofit on two things at the same time. First, financial sustainability. Can they keep the lights on and manage their money well? And second, and more importantly, social impact. Are they actually achieving their mission? Are they making a real difference in the world?
And so I'll leave you with this one thought, a way to totally reframe how you look at these organizations. The next time you're thinking about supporting a nonprofit, instead of asking, how low is your overhead, what if we all started asking a much better, much more powerful question? How high is your impact? Because that's the bottom line that truly matters.